this subject a little bit with our speakers, and you're free, of course, to express your opinion on that theory as well. These are two different points of view, containment and domino in the 21st century. Do they really apply? Don't know. That's anyone's guess. Anyway, to discuss this very interesting idea and other aspects of this panel, we've got a very interesting mix of panelists here. I'm going to introduce them right now very briefly. You know who they are. They're labeled. Nevertheless, we have Alexander Litvinenko, the Secretary of National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine. I hope I didn't mutilate your name too much. Quiet at the back of the room, please. It's only fair to our panelists. Orel Fondos, State Secretary, Ministry of Defense of the Republic of Moldova. We'll just start moving down the line. Well, they'll be speaking in this order, but I'll introduce them in a different order. Roman Jakic, former Minister of Defense of Slovenia. Andreas Peshke, Ambassador, Director for Eastern Europe at the German MFA. Lincoln Mitchell, a scholar with the Saltzman Institute at Columbia University in New York. And Robert Andrzejczyk, Director of Senate. So I think we should get started right away, given the time constraints we have. A couple of ground rules first. I'll stay here at the podium as you see, because I want to be able to survey the audience and discipline you if necessary. Panelists, please direct your remarks. Any question I ask to you, don't direct it to me, but to the audience. You're being filmed. It's those you need to convince, not me. And finally, you, the audience, please, if you're going to make an introductory remark, you better keep it short and to the point, or I will cut you off. Your role basically is to ask questions. They are the ones to speechify. Okay? So let's try and stick to that, all right? Very well. We'll give each of you about 4 or 5 minutes, starting from my left, moving down. Then I would like to encourage our panelists a little bit, in contrast to some of the previous panels, to just cut in right away. You don't always have to get my permission to speak. If you agree or disagree with something one of your panelists has said, and we can even organically take questions from the audience if there's a burning question that you want to ask at that moment. All right? Otherwise, we'll keep the questions toward the end. Very well. Let's start with you.
Okay. First of all, I'm very thankful for Defense Ministry of Republic of Georgia for this opportunity to express my view on the situation which we met, challenges which we met in our region right now. And I want to start from a few very small points. First of all, I think that it's very important to have a clear understanding of definition. We are speaking about Ukrainian crisis, but from my point of view, we can't say about pure Ukrainian crisis, at least after the March of 2014. We have to speak of direct Russian aggression against Ukraine. The second point which I want to express is that this situation, this aggression, we have to consider among with few other cases, such as Transnistria, South Ossetia, Abkhazia, Nagorno-Karabakh, and others, which were provoked by Russian policy. And we can say that the experience of these conflicts taught us that these conflicts can be resolved without cardinal change of Russian policy in this region. The third point which I want to say is that when we speak about Ukrainian events, now the most important agreement, the most important diplomatic process which we participate is the so-called Minsk process. In this process, were criticized in Ukraine and abroad, but this process, this negotiation, have at least one very important result. We de-escalate, this process allowed us to de-escalate this conflict. And from 175 shelling which we had in August, one day of August, now we have actually 13 shelling per day. The fourth point I want to return to Minsk. This process allowed us to de-escalate the situation, but unfortunately this negotiation can't be resolved the crisis in the whole. I think that we can't resolve this crisis as a separate case without a resolution of other crises. About them I said a few minutes ago. And maybe it sounds quite provocative, but I think we can't say about Ukrainian issue, Georgian issue, or maybe Azerbaijan or Armenian issue. We have to say about Russian issue. Without resolution of this issue, without democratic, prosperous, peaceful Russia, we can't think about the peaceful and security and stability in this region. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Short and sweet. Ambassador, we move on to you.
Thank you very much, Kamadjova. First of all, I would like to say thank you to our Georgian hosts for this wonderful conference. I think we all enjoyed it very much. It's very useful. And at least for me, it has brought a lot of insights. I would like to make 3 points. My first point is that with Russia, by its actions vis-à-vis Ukraine and before that Georgia and other places has challenged the European and international security architecture. A challenge that is felt far beyond Ukraine, where it is really acute now. It is also acutely felt in Georgia. And I think we need a very principled stand on this issue. This is a violation of the territorial integrity of sovereign states, which is not acceptable at all. We need an international order which has to be rules-based. And we took a principled stand inside the European Union by passing sanctions against Russia. I think tough sanctions, the effect of which is really being felt in Russia as well, and which by our view has also brought about a change, slight change, although in Russian policy. The second point I would like to make is that our focus right now is to defuse and possibly overcome conflict and the crisis in connection with eastern Ukraine. I think we do this together with all our international partners, with our Ukrainian friends, and also, of course, with our French partners who are also very active on this. It is a focus for German foreign policy at the moment right now. I would say that this Minsk process is not an easy enterprise at all. It is very difficult, but at least we have got first results. I think there's a ceasefire, Alexander has mentioned it. It has brought down the level of violence very much. And we see first signs of the ceasefire being consolidated to an extent. Weapons are being withdrawn, tanks are being withdrawn. We would like to extend this withdrawal of weapons also to heavy weapons. And of course now we also need to focus via the trilateral contact group on the political process, on questions like local elections. After we had local elections in all of Ukraine, I think we also need proper local elections in the Donbass. My third point is that we need to look at our partner countries, from German perspective, at our partner countries in the East. I think we need to strengthen the resilience of the societies which are under threat of destabilization. And in our view, the best kind of resilience we can create is that we help and support development of free democratic and prosperous societies, which are least vulnerable to external destabilization. So therefore, we very heavily lend our support to freedom, democratic principles, economic prosperity. This is at the heart of our partnership with Ukraine, at the heart of our partnership with Georgia. I think bilaterally only Germany, we offered Ukraine in 2015 700 million euros in terms of grants and credits for decentralization, economic development, energy efficiency, other things. In Georgia, I think the European Union from 2014 until 2017 is offering between 300 and 400 million euros. We have enormous bilateral support as well for economic diversification, public administration reform. I think these are all issues which maybe are not directly related to hardcore security, but which help a lot to create or to support the reform process at which these societies are aiming, and reform process which will make these societies less vulnerable, stronger, and more independent. So these are my 3 points. I would just like to add one sentence, that Germany has taken over the OSCE chairmanship in 2016. And of course, among other things, the conflict resolution in our regional conflict areas, that is eastern Ukraine, that is the breakaway regions in Georgia via the Riva talks, this is the 5+2, vis-à-vis Moldova, this is the Minsk group, vis-à-vis Nagorno-Karabakh. Of course, this will also be very much at the heart and in focus of our coming OSCE chairmanship. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Interesting that you mentioned that there's been a slight change in Russian policy. I assume there you must mean regarding the diminution, slight diminution of violence in Eastern Europe. But if there are other areas that you can see, that would be interesting to come back to that later in the day. Okay, moving on to our third speaker, Mr. Fondos.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's interesting time for 2 days. Our delegation, we were part of 2 major activities, including official meeting with the Minister of Defense of Georgia, and we're very proud that we got such good friends. And the entire part of conference, and trying to do our best as our conference organisators to fulfill all this time with great content. So, on the other hand, when I read for the first time about my, let's say, presentation and about our panel agenda, when I read about threat of domino effect, I thought, so who is next? And I keep myself calm because I noticed on myself, because actually the Republic of Moldova experienced this kind of aggression, which right now our friends from East Ukraine are facing in 1992. So more or less we got this experience when we are trying to build up our defense and security on basically this experience. And of course, current developments in the our eastern powers and eastern defense, Ukraine. So from this point, I'll bring our approach how we deal with such changes in the regional situation. So we decided, especially from 2014, we got this from February and beginning of March 2014, wake up call. That we need to change to address new, let's say, changes in our security policies, and they brought this concept of 2 pillars. First is cooperative security, and the second pillar is consolidation of national defense capacities for each individual state. So first, about the cooperative security. Well, Moldova is a small country, and at the same time, we know the status of our neighbors. Romania, our best friend in the east and the west, is a European Union and NATO member, and Ukraine, which are right now facing this crisis with Russian aggression. So, corporate security for us does mean not only military means, but all instruments of power, economic, informational, other types of let's say power, internally and externally. So what does mean internally? Internally means first inside of our, let's say, agencies, our institutions, cooperation among all security-based institutions like Minister of Defense, Minister of Interior, and we know to face new type of warfare like frankly like it called last year openly. First, we have to have integrity and consolidation inside the EU structure, defense and security structure. Secondly, is about external. So I will stick to a little bit this pillar. That's why the Republic of Moldova is continuously right now strengthening EU relations with strategic partners such as European Union, NATO, Romania, the United States, and other states. Well, European Union has emerged recently as a key player in the security sector reform in many countries. This reflects its multiplied role as the world's largest source of development. The prospect for cooperation with the European Union depends largely on building Moldova relevant capacities on security, defense, institutions, to fulfill their commitments in the area of European common security and defense policy. So from this year, we started not just to be concerned on this regard, but also to be provided and we sent for the first time our militaries in under the European Union umbrella in the south and central part of Central Republic, the African Republic. Second, it also enables Moldovan National Army to scale up its crisis, but just not Moldovan National Army, but also other security agencies in this regard, to scale up its crisis management and conflict prevention capabilities for further engagement and implementation of European mechanisms and ensuring continental and global security. So another two key priorities of cooperation under association agreement which we signed in 2013 in July is also short regional stability and conflict prevention and crisis management. Second, our field or area of cooperation is of course partnership with NATO organization. The Partnership for Peace program represents a political military platform that allows us partners to increase the defense capacities in the country. We are facing from 1997 several programs like IPAR, CARP, T, CBI, IPPI, BI, and OCC. And some programs will stick to second pillar just later. Finally, bilateral relations with our partners such as Romania, United States, Great Britain, and Lithuania provide us opportunity to use internal related to the cost of our concentration of our defense capacities. For instance, support which provides the United States to, our military is constituted during 2013 and 2015 1/3 of our military budget. Dear colleagues, the second pillar which I mentioned is the consolidation of defense capacity of each state. Thanks of each individual state creates potential of entire group. Now this creates a foundation of cooperative security, which comes first. Therefore, the Republic of Moldova is in the process of reforming several institutions that have direct responsibility for national security and defense. Here I would like to mention several initiatives that I consider as critical for defense reform. And the first part of my presentation was mentioned about DCBI. We are doing for us DCBI, Defense Capacity Building Initiative, which Moldova, NATO offered to Moldova in 2014 after the World Summit this year. So now, from June 2015, we started to adjust our legal framework. So we got the first phase. First phase, practical, stage will start when in the second week of November, several weeks, when we will start to implement, revise and adjust legal framework of strategic documents such as national security strategy, national defense strategy, and national military strategy. First phase will end in the first half of 2016, and CBI will continue with the elaboration of the optimal force structure of the national army. Also, we included as a capability building integrity, which it was a separate program when we decided to build up a new military establishment to modernize this national army. Building integrity is a crucial, I would say, cornerstone initiative in strategy. Moldova, from Soviet past, inherited many challenges such as corruption and the total lack of political and administrative culture necessary for a normal functioning of pluralist society. Consequently, the building integrity program becomes extremely relevant in this context of recent economic troubles, as you probably know, everyone knows, that occurred in our country. This program aims at reducing the level of corruption at institutional level. Additionally, this program should increase trust between the government of the Republic of Moldova and the people of the country. Just in a couple of minutes, I would like to spend on how this situation in the eastern part of the Republic of Moldova impede and make some obstacles to promote two pillars to consolidate our defense and security. But I will speak for when we have open for discussion, and I'll do this point. Thank you.
Good, because that's a lot of pages there. I let you speak a little bit longer because your two preceding speakers were very much to the point, but thank you for wrapping that up. Okay, fine. Floor is open to you, Roland.
Thank you, Brooks. It's really a great honor and pleasure to be here and to address this distinguished audience. It is my first time to be in Tbilisi and hopefully not the last. This magnificent place connects us to the past, a past that stretches back a millennium. It celebrates the rich history of Georgia capital as important political, culture and economical center of the Caucasus region. But it is also a stark reminder of the danger that our modern civilization faces. From across Iraq and Syria, the barbarians have returned in places like Mosul, Hatra and Palmyra. In addition to murdering people, the terrorists of ISIL are destroying humanity's heritage on an epic scale. Along with weak and failing states in Northern Africa and the Middle East, this is creating enormous pressure on the south, with millions of displaced people seeking shelter in neighboring countries and across the Mediterranean in Europe. My own country, Slovenia, is concretely hit by the effects of this largest humanitarian crisis after the world has known since the Second World War. Not to mention the ongoing threat of terrorist attacks on the streets of our own nation. So, to the south, the challenges are complex and diverse. As NATO Secretary General Mr. Stoltenberg said, the Arab Spring has turned to a brutal winter. ISIL and other extremist groups are spreading terror and intolerance and inspire attacks from Paris to Texas. And people move in large numbers, many to flee, others to fight. So what about the challenges coming from the east? On the 9th of November 1989, we all thought that a new order was about to start. I was 22 at that time. And at that age, you are full of hopes and dreams. It would have been impossible for anyone in those days to convince that the future of Europe was not going to be bright and peaceful. The fall of the Berlin Wall was opening the doors to great opportunities and also the great expectations. Today, 25 or next month it will be 26 years later, we hardly dare to refer to any form of world order. And rightly so, in the world we see emerging, it's hard to define the centers of power. They are multiple, of different nature, and overlapping in rather chaotic way. 26 years after the end of the old bipolar system, the world is far from unipolar, nor is truly multipolar. Maybe, as EU High Representative Madame Mogherini said, we are living in the times of absence of poles, times of an endless transition to something we cannot yet define. Complexity, conflict, interdependence seems to be the only elements we can be sure of when we refer to our times. So does Ukraine crisis challenging Europe's security architecture? Yes, it does. We must not underestimate what is at stake. First and foremost, it is the human lives. The latest numbers are appalling. Almost 8,000 people killed, 1.5 million displaced, and another 1.1 million have left the country since the start of the conflict. And second, basic principles of international law have been challenged. So territorial integrity, sovereignty, and inviolability of borders. So the cornerstones of the European security order. Does this mean domino effect? Maybe. Yes, if we will organize ourselves. No, I will put it first. No. No, if we will organize ourselves, as was said this morning by distinguished panelists on hybrid warfare, and yes, if we will not do so. But besides the negative kind of domino effect, I would like to see, as a politician, positive as well. And for me, positive would be a real Euro-Atlantic open door policy for aspirant countries that, for the most, includes, besides Montenegro, also Georgia.
In Ukraine?
I'm a politician.
Thank you very much for those punchy comments. Down the line to you and
I think, dude, it's being almost everything. Maybe by some of the people in this room, but never a politician. I want to thank SINA, GFSIS, the Georgia Defense Ministry, and specifically the Minister, Tina Kidishelli, for putting this great event together and for inviting me here to participate. It's always very nice to be back in Georgia, to see old friends, to stay at what is probably my favorite, not probably, definitely my favorite holiday in the world. I mean, that's a compliment. When I was outside before the event, before this panel, trying to figure out, I had two questions that were going through my head about what I would say. The first is, what can I possibly say about Ukraine that is new? Both in the context of the last 2 days here and also the broader discussion about Ukraine, and especially given this rather impressive panel in which I've been asked to participate. I also was a little troubled by something, which I agree with much of what has been said about Russia in the last day or two. Let me summarize that very briefly. This is my own language, but I think everyone has touched on most of these points. Russia does not want its neighbors to chart their own foreign policy courses, right? Russia does not want Georgia to say, we the Georgian people, we the Ukrainian people want to go into NATO. They're not happy about that. Russia has intervened aggressively, nastily, illegally, there are other adverbs you could use, in Georgia, in Ukraine, and as far as I can see, has no real intention of stopping at that. And the possibility, the likelihood that they go on is something we have to take very seriously. I also want to add that this is an important issue which we haven't, I think it's implicit here, but it's worth stating. These interventions are Russian creations. There's no Donbass Liberation Front that they went to aid. This is a Russian creation to destabilize Ukraine. I also want to add, we've said this before, Putin is an authoritarian leader who is basing decisions largely, in my view, on domestic political survival as much as anything else. I also want to add that the European security architecture, to which the title of this panel alludes, is something with which the Russian leadership is not happy. I think we would all agree on those things. But I was questioning about where do we go from here, because if we end there, we haven't really said anything fruitful. We haven't articulated a policy. We haven't really done an analysis. What we've done, to use a Georgian word, is kvetch. But then I was thinking about this some more. And there's also a tendency, okay, I'm not in New York anymore, I'm sorry, kvetch is a Yiddish word. It means to complain. When I use that in New York, everyone laughs, I forgot, sorry. But there's also another problem here, which is if we take the easy way out methodologically and intellectually, we don't help ourselves, We don't help defeat or stop Russia, and we don't, those of us who are not Georgian, which is most of us on this panel, we don't help our Georgian friends. Let me flesh out what that means. If we attribute any view that does not hardline anti-Russia in the West, any politician that does not want to intervene, but send the full force as much as possible of American or European resources to Ukraine, if we attribute that to useful idiots, people being tools and victims of Russian propaganda, these are all things we heard this week. Brainwashing by left-wing professors, something I couldn't help but take personally. And the like, we feel good, right? We feel good. In the United States, the opinion pieces of the major newspapers are the 73rd reason why Putin is like Hitler, right? The 128th way in which Putin has broken international law. I'm not sure where that gets us. And I mean that as somebody who is very concerned about this issue, not as somebody who's trying to craft some narrative that Putin didn't do anything wrong, because I believe he's done a hell of a lot wrong. But this leads to bad analysis, and it leads to unrealistic solutions. And in my view, that's very, very troubling. We don't get to the answers if we just, in the, we're having this 18-month reality show in the United States called the Republican Primary. And it's very interesting to watch, because when you ask these guys about, and Carly Fiorina, about foreign policy, the answer is, no matter what the question is, subject, verb, Obama is you, right? If you are hanging out outside the Republican debate and you're lost and you say, where's the subway stop? They will all say, Obama is you. But again, that's, whether or not you think that's true, that's not really an answer. And if you don't probe why, right, what is really going on? What are the real responsibilities of the American president? What are the real issues facing the American president? Maybe you disagree with the policy on Ukraine, maybe you don't. But you have to look a little beyond that. The illustrative example I would give is that if you follow the discussion closely, just like the bandwidth to talk about Russia is very narrow in the United States, the policy options are very narrow, right? So the policy of sanctions, and we could, or certainly some of us would say we could have stronger sanctions or bigger sanctions against Russia, but there's a pretty broad consensus on the idea of sanctions. Moving NATO resources to the eastern part of NATO to kind of show strength there, broad consensus around that. We would be sending more planes. Some would say yes, some would say we'd send enough, but there's a consensus around those issues. There's not much, the question of arming Ukraine is the one issue where there's been a fair amount of dispute, but there's not as many policy options as we would like, which makes this much more difficult. And it makes the going down back to the well of Russian propaganda an even less fruitful way to understand this. I want to add a couple of last points on this, and then I'm trying to respect the moderator's attention to keep us brief here. In the U.S. at least, I think the West largely, the Ukraine situation is increasingly viewed as a petty conflict, right? No one is talking about a strategy, how do we get Crimea out of Russia's hands, right? Just like nobody's talking about a strategy here about, well, let's leave it at that. What Putin has done in Syria in the last few weeks, month, the Russian policy in Syria has, unfortunately, in my view, shifted emphasis away from Ukraine, right? Away from what Russia is doing in Ukraine. This is very unfortunate because it seems to me the two are related. The concern about what is next, what country might be next, is very real. We've all talked about it today, but no one really has the answer, and of course we're not going to know that. Lastly, there is, well, second to lastly, there is this question, because we're talking a lot about NATO, and there's this contradiction that's kind of underlying a lot of this, which we hear NATO is weak because of what's happening in Ukraine, right? And I think one of the gentlemen on the previous panel talked about how there's this gray area on one of the previous panels of Russia, of Ukraine, Georgia, and some of the other areas, and then there's the actual NATO member countries. It is significant that Ukraine is not in NATO. It is significant that Putin and Russia felt more confident doing that than NATO, than in a NATO country, a smaller, less powerful NATO country. But what we also see at the same time is this kind of testing the boundaries of what can and can't be done in NATO countries. And to me, that's a very serious concern because, we do have to be prepared that if that line is crossed, NATO, as far as I can see, doesn't have a lot of options. And that's it's a distressing thing for, I think, everybody. I want to just wrap up because we are in Georgia with a couple of one line about Georgia. Georgia isn't next. Georgia was first. And since the Russian invasion of Crimea, particularly people who don't study the region, these two have been lumped together. And I would just suggest that it's important to understand the different story of Georgia and Ukraine. It's important for Georgia, it's important for Ukraine, it's important for Europe. But related to that, if Crimea and eastern and southern Ukraine are seen as a fait accompli, it's pretty clear that Abkhazia and South Ossetia are going to be seen that way as well, which is also a sense. And I just wanted to talk to I'm not going to talk about the domino effect, being a child of the Cold War. But I would just say this, if the security architecture of Europe cannot withstand this, then maybe it wasn't all that we thought it was. But related to that, if Crimea...
We'll definitely come back to that last sentence. Let's move on to our final speaker, Robert. You have the floor.
I really like challenges, including being the last speaker with last panel on the second day of the conference. Our experience, they say that it's time to tell a joke. I'm very bad in jokes, so I'll try to offer to give some analysis. Basically, almost everything has been called about Russian policies, Russian foreign policy, security policy, intentions, and also almost everything has been called about the NATO's reassurances and NATO's policies, how the alliance reacted. So I'll try to offer you a bit of regional view, how we perceive in Central Europe those most important strategic trends which are influencing and will influence our security in the foreseeable future. I will identify 5 of those strategic trends which are important for us. If I'm talking about Central Europe, I'm talking about the broader region from the Baltics to Scandinavia to the Black Sea. First, the American strategic appearance, and secondarily, the British and French strategic appearance in Central Europe. It includes also the plan to deploy around 1 brigade to Central and Eastern European countries, at least 1 battalion to Baltic states, 1 battalion to Poland, 1 to Romania and Bulgaria. We are talking about 4,000 to 5,000 people, which, if you are comparing it to Russian ability to deploy in a very short notice several thousand troops in the main strategic axis, it's not a lot, of course, but strategically it's very important because from today, or from the day when those troops will be deployed, it means that if anybody tries to be engaged in those countries, that person or that leadership will never know if they will meet only Lithuanian, Latvian, Polish, or also American troops. So the strategic significance is really much more higher than if you are talking only about the numbers. Second thing, the French and British strategic engagement in Central Europe, which was never the case. So the Brits and French, they were really active in various parts of the world, but we never perceived Leclerc main battle tanks in Poland, for example, before. And now we are witnessing it, even if it's on a rotational basis. But France deployed quite significant forces to Poland and the Baltic countries after the annexation of Crimea. So this is the first strategic trend, which is very important for us. Second, the mental and political escape of Ukraine from the strategic grid zone. If we are comparing the changes of Ukrainian society, the priorities of Ukrainian society, and the foreign policy priorities of Ukrainian society, and the threat perception of Ukrainian society, I don't know, 4 to 5 years ago, to the current data, we'll see very, very significant changes. Somebody already told, I guess it was Anya, that 4 years ago only 40 or 30% of Ukrainian society supported the potential NATO membership. 2 years ago, that number already increased to or reached 50%. Also, 3 or 4 years ago, according to Razunkov Center's public polls, NATO was perceived as the most important threat to Ukraine by Ukrainian society. Around 35% of Ukrainians, they perceive NATO as the most important security threat, and only 22% of Ukrainians perceive Russia as the most important security threat for the country. After events in Donbass and Crimea, again, it very significantly changed. Why it is important for us? Ukraine itself, I'm really excusing my Georgian friends, but Ukraine itself is much more important than all other Eastern Partnership countries altogether because of demographic, political, and economic size. So whatever happens in Ukraine, it directly influences not only Central European future but also the whole European security architecture. If Ukraine's security is directly interlinked with our security. So if Ukrainian politics and public is undergoing such a deep strategy change, it's very important for us. Second, the increase of the Black Sea is important in the overall European and Euro-Atlantic strategic calculations. Till the annexation of Crimea, Black Sea was important, but in comparison to the main European strategic axis, just secondary importance to that Polish, Belarusian, and Baltic theater. Now it's becoming more and more important. Of course, it has very important consequences not only for the countries of the Black Sea region, but also for us. The Russian military build-up in Crimea and the increase of power projection capabilities, which Crimean strategic location and military build-up offers to Russia, directly affects not only Bulgarian or Romanian or Georgian security, but also opens the door for Russian power projection over also to the broader region. The next strategic trend, which is very important for us, is the opening or launching the serious Swedish and Finnish discussion about the future of neutrality. I'm not saying that Sweden and Finland will become NATO member in a day or 1 year or 10 years. Perhaps it will never happen. But the fact itself that those countries are discussing about this, it's already changing the strategic landscape for the Baltic countries. And the whole discussion about the Arctic and Baltic is shifting towards the Baltic Sea. Of course, those Russian actions in the Baltic Sea and like a year and a half ago to simulate a nuclear attack on Stockholm, for example, with the Eastern holidays, they're contributing to those discussions very much. Also about Russian contingency plans to create by airborne forces a no-fly zone from Gotland, which is a Swedish island in the middle of the Baltic. It's quite an important something which we have to take into account. Again, I'm not saying that those countries are going to join NATO. On the other hand, NATO applies policy, very specific policy over those countries, the very open door policy, I would say. So if the membership of those countries is only it's only about the decision of Stockholm and Helsinki. If they want, they can join very smoothly and rapidly. Of course, again, for example, Finland, the Finnish security policy, the creation of the Finnish very rapid reaction forces as a reaction on the Russian capabilities to deploy in very short notice very significant forces was a reaction that Finland itself poses a very significant mobilization capabilities which offers the country readiness, mobilized force almost to the level of Germany. Perhaps it's unbelievable, but it's the reality. So it belongs to the broader strategic picture. The fifth, and I will close my remarks with this one, the widening of Polish strategic scope at the regional level, which is very important for us and very important for me as an expert or representative of Slovakia. P4 was always P4, I mean Visegrad for Poland, Czech Republic, Hungary, and Slovakia, was almost the primary framework for Polish security policy at the regional level. Unfortunately, because of the P4 internal differences, thanks to as a consequence of Ukrainian crisis or after the Ukrainian war, basically almost destroyed the strategic unity of Visegrad Four. Polish threat perception so much differs from the rest three countries that Poland started to seek new possibilities at regional level. If you read the, I guess it's it's a year old strategic document, the new Polish security strategy, there are already first signs of the strategic change. Once they propose or they are talking about establishing stronger ties with like-minded countries, and their Romanians are mentioned, for example. Just a few weeks ago, they signed a defense agreement with Sweden. So there's both dimensions of Polish, both the northern, or Baltic dimension, and the southern dimension are broadened by new regional alliances with Poland. Not to mention the Baltic, which is the Baltic countries, which is very like-minded, of course, to Polish security policy. We will see the impact of the current elections in Poland, and how it will transform the Polish security policy. I don't expect so much so deep changes as some scared commentators are used to say, but some change will come for sure, and it will I guess will support this argument of broader Polish regional engagement and perhaps more intensive seek for Polish leadership in the region, which will include also Ukraine, for example. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Okay, now what we see, each of you highlighted what you consider to be the important points either in the region for your country or how you see security policy. Let's come back just very briefly. In the title of this panel, we've got the domino effect, whether you believe it or not, and European architecture. First, let's get the domino thing out of the way. Do we believe that's what's behind Russia's conflicts or not? If it is it strictly a physical thing? That doesn't seem very likely, or is it a political sort of domino game? That is, keep everything frozen, keep everything ambiguous, keep everything off balance. You either adhere to that or you don't. Secondly, what are the implications for security architecture? Now, Russia has the luxury as a single country, big country, much like America, of coming up with a unified defense and security policy. I think we can safely assume that's what's at play right now. We don't have that luxury within the EU and NATO. That's a big problem. What do we do about this? And we need a new security vision. OSCE. What's Russia trying to do with the OSCE? Is she trying to replace that old idea of the European, Russian-dominated European architecture? Is that dead or alive? Is this behind Russia's thinking? I think we need to perhaps move away from just narrow focus on Slovenia's problems, for instance, or Romania, and try and think a little bit broader. First of all, the domino. You guys believe in this domino or not? Let's answer that. Let's come to the security architecture. What does Europe and NATO need to do? The RAP is one thing. The reassurance plan of NATO is one thing. But again, this is a bit pot-shot. It's also heavily oriented toward the east and not toward the south. We need a southern RAP. These are some of the bigger questions that I think NATO and the EU need to start pondering, and also how to bring those two nations closer together. Do we put pressure on Turkey, some sort of quid pro quo, that Turkey can give you billions now to take care of our migrant problem, but you've got to lift the veto on formal cooperation between NATO and the EU. These are some of the questions. Domino, who here believes in the domino effect behind Russia's moves right now?
Thank you so much. From my point of view, I think the main goal of Russian policy right now is to preserve Putin in the Kremlin. He is not imperialist at all. He wants to be in Kremlin, and he will do what he can for achieving this goal. The second point The situation in Russia is quite difficult. I am very far from the idea that Russia is about to collapse or something like this. Russian situation is, in economy is quite difficult, but they have a quite big amount of resources. At least $370 billion. It's quite big amount of money. The economy is quite strong. It drops only 5% by this year. In next year, the consensus forecast is about minus 1%. And the situation is difficult, but not dramatic. But now, Putin has the foreign policy. The international adventure, foreign adventures, has become the most pillar for his power. He has to maintain some level of chauvinistic, nationalistic history in his country, and he will do what he can for maintaining of this level. It's caused that he became a kind of gambler. He will try to do something in Ukraine. He understood that it's demand from him more money, more resources, more lives of people, and he changed his attention to Syria. If he will be successful in Syria, he will achieve the goal, and he can speak about the big victory in the Middle East. If he lost, he will be he have to choose another victim, and he will attack. What kind of country will be next? Moldova or Kazakhstan or other countries? Nobody knows.
Okay, so in other words, domino is not irrelevant. Is irrelevant. This is power preservation.
Yeah, it's not.
Fair enough.
Wait, I just do have to be careful. I'm always wary of these kind of analogies in politics because
This is why I'm bringing this up. This
right,
is a very bombastic title.
when you say domino effect, you're referring to the game domino. You knock one over, the next one knocks over. But you're also talking about a specific historical thing, right? So is it a domino effect? Well, it is a domino effect in the sense that it could easily be one country and then another for a while, right? But during the Cold War, it was Cuba, Nicaragua, Mexico, Texas. Right? I mean, it was a much more, from the American perspective, and President Reagan used to say that, right? The Sandinistas are only X miles away from Texas. That was supposed to scare us. So that's why the analogy breaks down, because I don't think it's that dramatic. If you make that analogy, it leads to, again, I think, of course, a policy for sure.
I agree. I also think these audience questions, I don't think the domino effect is at play for one primary reason. During the domino years of the Cold War, if you felt that a country was coming under attack by communism, the individual countries in the West began shipping arms. Put it very brutally. Lots of arms started flowing into those countries. We're not seeing Western arms going into Ukraine or into Georgia in any volume. You may dispute that if you will. That's one acid test for whether we're in a real domino situation. Anyone else care to comment on some of these issues? Yes, sir.
It's just an regard to domino effect. Domino effect is, from our point of view, if you see that Russians right now are keeping engaged, let's say, on this action in eastern part of our country, in the Eastern region from 1992, and they call this so-called peacekeeping operation. And now, talking about this domino effect and who is next, they started some part of so-called hybrid operation, or let's say warfare, to corrupt our politicians. So it's interesting, something new for us, and I started this recently because these sanctions from Western European Union and United States tried to affect. We started to do something else after Ukraine opened aggression to Moldova, and now, as I mentioned, I will stop for a while. our two pillars, the corporate security and consolidation of national defense and security of our, let's say, country, is mainly happening. So, again, effect of domino, we see that one side keep tensions in a part of the country to to improve this country defense and security funding to be increased, and on the other hand, just to corrupt your politicians. And you'll see one day in some quite democratic way of some elections, so-called left-wing parties will come in power. That's it, one side.
Andres Martinez?
Yes, actually, I don't know about domino. I tend to agree with so much of what our American friend has said. I would rather agree with what Alexander has said, that much of Russia's policy is motivated also by domestic factors. I think that certainly plays a role. I think we find it very difficult to decipher what Russia is going to do next. But our analysis, at least in our analysis, much of what Russia is doing is motivated by domestic factors. We also, in our analysis, think that much of what Russia is doing is motivated by tactical factors rather than strategy, using tactical openings. That is why I think it is very important that we stand united. I think Syria, probably there was this imminent threat to Russia that Assad would fall, so they got in. But do they have a strategy, what they're going to do next in Syria? We certainly have our doubts about it. To your second question, Brooke, I think a security strategy, I think yes, we need a general debate on a security strategy. And that is why I think what the European Union is about to do, to discuss about the new European Union security strategy, is a very wise enterprise. I think we need that. I think Russia is a challenge, but we face a lot of new challenges like cyber warfare, hybrid warfare, terrorism and others. And I think we need to think about these challenges in a strategic way and to come up with proper answers to these challenges.
Well, now, if the EU's new security strategy is something more than the 2003 one, fine, but it's just a simple statement of, we think this is important, that is, without energizing CSDP, it won't go anywhere. I see a lot of hands in the audience. You refer, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, we'll start here. Let's take 3. If it's addressed to a specific panelist, please say so. Can we have the microphone up here? Please state your name and file. Keep it short.
Yep. No, the question of the GXS. I'll try to introduce a different perspective. Why don't we look at domino effect not from the geography or from the perspective of some countries, but from the principles? I think one can say that there were certain principles after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the Cold War. First, it's border issue. You can't occupy other countries. Saddam tried and was punished. Second, if the Western coalition is against you, you're going to end up very bad, and there are lots of examples of that. And third, if you try to isolate yourself, there's nothing good going to happen. So, Putin started one by one to undermine certain principles. First was Crimea, he occupied it, so what? Nothing, he still has it. Second, now he demonstrates that although all West is opposing Mr. Assad, but he's going to defend you. And despite of this principle that if West targets you, you're going to end up in a very bad situation, Mr. Assad will give you power. So next, I'm trying to say that maybe it's his plan to undermine this, and this is the number 129, Lincoln, reason why he looks like Hitler. He tries to undermine this order of the post-Cold War, which
So it's not just driven internally, it's got external.
yeah, that's also one way.
Okay.
And very shortly, I think it's a bit, maybe it's a mistake to say that Russia is not a strategy. The Soviet Union always had a strategy. Sometimes stupid one, they always did. I think Russians are not that stupid that they don't have strategy, just tactics. Maybe we should not underestimate our leaders.
Thank you very much for that. Next. The lady up here.
That's also one way. Again, very shortly. I think
Please try to ask the question.
Okay, Paweł Pawłowicz, International Black Sea University. My first question going to be about Ukraine. You just indicated it was Syria and Ukraine as slightly moving from the agenda. So what kind of projections you could draw about? Do you really believe that maintaining the status quo is in the interest of Russia and in the interest of the Western countries? And now one is talking about Crimea right now. It's all going to be generally about Ukraine. And my second question goes to Robert. As you said, you like challenges. That's why you are the latest speaker of this conference. Sweden and Finland and their potential NATO membership, and all this discourse started from cutting the military expenses. So while the chief of military staff of Sweden indicated that if Russia attacks Sweden, they can defend themselves for a couple of days, and Russia could occupy Gotland for a couple of hours.
Point, ask the question.
Yes.
You have more questions?
Yes, absolutely. Considering the mechanism Sweden and Finland have within the European Union, I'm talking about the unilateral declaration of solidarity, which Sweden and Finland rely on, and considering the social democratic government currently in Sweden, could we consider then in a long-term perspective even neutralization or even NATO membership as a perspective for Sweden and Finland?
Okay, that's a good question. Let's move over to the left side.
Sorry.
I'd like to thank the panelists for a broad views that they have presented to us. But don't you think that it's a bit oversimplification to put all the conflicts in one basket and give that basket Russia to carry on? It's not only oversimplification, but it's also dangerous because it relieves the sides that are involved in different conflicts, which are really different, of the responsibility to engage in earnest in the search of solutions to these conflicts. And then even Russia, as omnipresent and almighty, could not exploit and create a conflict situation if there is no conflict situation there, because all the conflicts have their own history and their root causes.
Okay, I'm not sure that was more of a statement than a question. Okay, we'll take one quick question here and then pass. Keep it brief.
Yeah, I have a question to Alexander and Andreas. I want to make it a comparative, actually. Talking to the security architecture in Europe, don't you think that the Russian invasion of Ukraine successfully ended up the debate what should be first, security or democratic transition or democratic consolidation? So we see that security matters first. So a country like Ukraine needs a credible guarantee of security to develop successfully towards the West, to build a country like a Western model country. In this, under this context, what do you think that Minsk agreements really represent a credible guarantee that will allow Ukraine to continue its development? Or do you think that there should be much more stronger mechanism in place to make the stability consolidation, as you said, irreversible? Thank you.
Okay, good. Cut it off. There was a question on special status from Sweden and domino effect. And in Sweden, should there be special status for those two countries?
I'm afraid I didn't get the question in its complexity.
As I understood it was, should we give some kind of special in-between status to Sweden, Finland, and Sweden into the alliance agreement?
The question actually was that the public opinion is moving towards NATO.
Yep.
However, the government declared in their foreign policy manifest that they are not going to join NATO. Particularly the social democratic government of Stefan Löfven.
Thanks. It's a very good question. Thank you for explanation. Sure. It's the reason why I said that it's not decided. It's just a discussion, but opening the discussion itself has already strategic consequence. So surely the public opinion is moving towards support to the membership, and it's moving towards 50%, but it's still below 50%. And in Sweden, there is a difference between, or there's a dispute between left wing and right wing in NATO membership. It's the same in Finland. The current president made it clear, for example, our president, Slovak president was current from Finland, they discussed those issues, and he made it clear that he's very fine with neutrality, and he argued with Finnish defense capabilities that they are able to defend themselves, at least for short notice. Second thing, what you mentioned, that there's some special status for Finland and Sweden. So some status between. I don't believe in those issues. So you are under Article 5, or you are not under the Article 5. Finland and Sweden are already completely interoperable with NATO forces in terms of technical issues, procedures. So if the political decision will come, they can join NATO without any problems. They can fight together very effectively with NATO countries because of the interoperability. They have common experiences in fighting together in different theaters. But despite those things, I still don't believe that something like this exists, that half NATO membership or like this. I would have a very nice comparison, but it's fine.
Okay, coming back to the question from the front row, Russia does have a strategy, a unified strategy, versus a collection of tactical moves. Yes or no? I heard from Andreas saying perhaps not. Come in on that.
I think it was a two-part question, so I'll try to take a crack at it. I think Russia, I mean, these are gray area terms. Russia clearly has a set of goals. In addition to Putin's personal goal, I want to be in power on Sunday, and then next Sunday's goal will be in power tomorrow. And those goals are some of the things you touched about, which is to push back against the Western and, for their read, American created security, rules, mores, architecture. It's very clear to me that that's a big part of his game. He sees Russia's role as a counterbalance to what he sees as American, maybe Western, maybe NATO, but really an emphasis on American power. And at times he has sought to build a global kind of a coalition around that. I'm not sure he's been as successful as he would like. I would say he has not been as successful as he would like. But that is part of his goals. Whether that counts as strategy, to me, that's just a subjective thing. I just wanted to, someone asked a question about does Russia benefit from maintaining the status quo in Ukraine? Was that the right question that someone phrased? If not, I'm going to answer it anyway, so you get a bonus. That's a very good question. I mean, we saw this in Caucasus and South Ossetia in 2008 when Russia declared these places independent, went to Bishkek, and none of their Central Asian friends supported them because China doesn't like separatist movements, and they're more dealing with China than with Russia, as anyone who's been to Central Asia in the last decade could have figured out. But in my view, Russia's goal is not to build it's not the Western goal of helping Georgia develop into a NATO member. It's the goal of creating a mess, muddying the waters. And in that regard, the status quo does benefit Russia. It's expensive. There's going to take more casualties. It's not pleasant, but it's going to benefit Russia more than it's going to benefit Russia.
Roman, can I have a quick comment?
Yeah,
in my view, Russia's goal is
I will also answer you basically the question, Brooks, about the EU common or European security and defense policy. I must defend that part. We have. It's not comparable, as you said, with America or Russia, because it's just unite. We always need to find a unanimous decision, but we did it concerning this, and we have the common foreign and security policy, we have the common military and civilian mission, sanction policy, crisis response system, crisis management. The problem, as I can feel here in this kind of conference, is we are inside the European Union. I'm talking about my country. My country is inside the NATO, so we are somehow protected. I don't feel that somebody from outside can do something to the EU member states or the NATO states. NATO, we have the protection 5th article, etc. In EU, we have the European Security Defense Common European. The problem is what to do with those countries outside of EU and NATO. So Moldova, Ukraine, Georgia, because they are afraid that they basically felt this aggression on this side. So they would like to be on safe side as we are. That's why I'm all the time, and I was one of the big pusher inside the defense ministers, a group of the ministers, to pushing to be step forward, to be a leader, not to be the follower. inside it. That's why I'm all the time talking, and sometimes I'm listening too much to myself about the open door policy. I tweeted first when the crisis appeared in Ukraine. My first tweet as the Minister of Defense was that now is the time to take on board Georgia and the other countries. Why? Because I think that we are all full of mouth of talking about the open door policy, but that doors are bloody closed all the time. I mean, since Hillary Clinton in Chicago 2012 on the summit said, this will be I hope this will be the last summit without the topic on it, the enlargement. By the way, in that time it was the enlargement, not the open door policy. And I think probably that's why we just finished this. But you know, we should be step forward, and we should act accordingly in this. So I'm missing the lack of leadership inside the EU and NATO. I'm not missing the common European security and defense policy.
Okay, maybe there's common foreign policy, but the D in CSDP is definitely more about it. Most folks in Brussels will say that off record.
Sorry.
Yes.
Very, very short comment. CSDP does exist, of course, but it's like a process which is sleeping very, very deep, and there is no kiss which is able to wake up.
Okay, that was a good one. Back to the floor. Okay, now we have to go in a certain order. Lady here, man in military uniform, and there's a fellow back there. So we'll take those three first. Okay? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, all panelists. I'm Energy Policy Analyst Georgia, GFSI space. Since we are talking about Russia challenging US-led international security architecture, my question goes to Mr. Tulinko. Do you think that we face Russia, just Russia, Mr. Chairman, that we face and disregard Russia and China together? Thank you.
An outstandingly brilliant question to be emulated, please, by everyone. Yes.
Challenging US-led international security architecture.
Top German defense attaché. I'd like to pick up this domino idea again. And I'd like to ask you for an assessment. Because I think we need not to talk about vertical lined up domino stones, but it's the domino game, which means you need to have the right stone with the right number to react on the stone which is put into the game. The question is, do we have enough stones in order to react, and are we capable to play them in due time?
Thank you, sir. So question, and finally the gentleman in the back, standing up. We'll come around to the rest. Not to worry. As long as the minister's not here, we'll...
Thanks. Laura Leffick, Estonian in favor of tornado. We all speak about the security architecture, forgetting, I think, that it was actually agreed during the Cold War. It starts from the Helsinki Accords, etc., etc. So that's nothing new. But my question really is that if we agree that Russia has violated all this rule-based security architecture we have, and when they are offering a new deal, basically as Medvedev proposals and current proposals have been, should we accept it? Or should we be nostalgic about the security architecture we had and we can't really implement at the moment? So what would be the sort of the Western policy to the situation Russia really has created? And we shouldn't blame ourselves too much about it. Thank you.
Okay. If we come back, we're pressed for time here. Come back up to the floor. All right. Domino effect. Do we have enough stones to counter the domino effect? Who wants to answer that? If anyone does. And should we accept Russia's proposal for its 5 or 6 year old architecture idea? Yes.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, I think that current Russian leadership doesn't need NAS unstable. It needs to create some chaotic situation which Russia will be able to achieve some small goals for supporting the domestic situation. But from my point of view, I'm going to return to a question about Russian strategy. Russia has strategy, but it's quite different from the Western country strategy. Russia has very strong understanding of goals, a very constant armory of means, but extremely flexible armory of ways. And this flexibility of ways seems as absent of strategy.
Thank you. Very briefly, do we face a Russian-China team?
Yes, that was. The short answer to that is that Moscow would like you to be facing a unified Russia-China bloc. I think that's a Russian fantasy. China is much more wealthier, much powerful, much stronger than Russia, and Russia would like to see itself as joining with China to lead this kind of bloc against American power. The Chinese leadership is too smart to be pulled into that game globally. Here in Georgia, I don't think so at all. I think that the increasing economic ties between Georgia and China, are a very smart move for a number of reasons, not least that in this country any kind of economic activities can be helpful, but also because it brings another player in other than the West, other than the NATO member states, that says, hey, we don't really want Russia having its way with Georgia. So potentially, I think that could be very good, and I don't think this is a problem.
Question from the back of the room.
Yes, it's Michael Vanderpool from Missouri in the United States, the American Press Association. I'm very thankful to the United States of America and to NATO for the film work I've been able to do. It's the only reason that I've been able to do that. And on the topic of territorial integrity with Georgia, I would respectfully ask, is there any mechanisms in place or special committees, or maybe there should be one, to strengthen the rule of law, international law? When the Russian military here is moving the fence, to me, and what I sense among the Georgians, it's a form of terrorism. And so my question is very simple. Is there any mechanisms in place that the Alliance may have or can look into on behalf of our Georgian friends to strengthen international law in that regard?
Okay, we'll take one more question very quickly. Up front. Raising the orange.
My name is Deborah Wyatt. I'm a German freelance journalist based in Georgia. Since it's the last panel, we talked a lot about hybrid warfare, the spreading of lies, propaganda, etc., and how that murkies the waters, has divided public opinion in many ways, weakened Europe. And my question goes to Andreas Paschke, following the events of Ukraine. Western European governments, particularly Germany, were very reluctant to call the events there for what they were, to call a spade a spade. And my question is, has the attitude in the German government, maybe even policy change, in the willingness to be clear when events like these happen, to call them for what they are, which might seem insignificant, but is an important message to countries like Georgia and Moldova, that we know what's happening and will find a response, whatever that might be.
So in other words, your question is Germany or other countries?
Has Germany changed its attitude in being more willing to call...
Gives clear signals.
Clear signals and call a spade, call it Russian aggression if it's not Russian aggression.
Clear signals. Third question.
Hello, my name is Sandra. I'm working for the Substantial NATO-Georgia Package of Communications. My question is, everyone is saying generally that Russia has seized the initiative in military terms through use of force. How can we seize back the initiative, but not in military terms? And I'm thinking of a broader concept of security that my Moldovan colleague mentioned, stabilization and bringing in economic policies, democratic structures, the inclusiveness of our societies, freedom of speech, responsiveness of our governments, and democratic structures, some of the aspects Russia's turned its back on. How can we create harmonized narratives out of that and fight back with that?
Okay, back to the panel. Is there a special committee for rule of law in Georgia's favor? I don't know whether there's a particular one, but anyone care to come in on that?
don't know what the question was exactly aiming at, but of course we have the Geneva talks on the territorial conflicts about the irregular regions in Georgia. I think this mechanism, well, has not yet brought the results we would wish for, but at least it is a mechanism. And I think we need to work to strengthen this mechanism. As for now, it is the only mechanism we have. And otherwise, for the space,
yes.
well, I think, but you would expect me also to think, as a representative of the German government, I think that we call a spade a spade. I think we were fairly clear in our language. We talked about conflict and we talked about war, calling a spade a spade. Otherwise, our policy is not about over language, but it's about over conflict resolution. And that is our main focus. We want to make a contribution to defuse, possibly solve the conflict in eastern Ukraine. And well, I'm not saying we are there yet, but there was some progress. And I think the only way we have is to follow up on this progress and try to reach further progress.
Okay, and on that third question, which is very broad-ranging, how to seize back the initiative from Russia. That would take 3 days to answer. Let me try and refine that a little bit. Can we live with the hodgepodge of policies that we have? Hodgepodge doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. Or do we need to realign them in a different way, perhaps CSDP for the EU, maybe a new policy for NATO or Washington, whatever. It's a little bit vague there. But do we need some rethink, or can we live with the tools that we have?
I'm the American friend, so I'm only going to speak about Washington with that question. And it's interesting being an American always, I think. But in this context, because things look very, I don't live in Washington. I'm an outsider. I'm like Ben Carson. You know, I go to Washington a few times a year, maybe. In America, it doesn't look like Russia is winning. Right? That is certainly not. The perception in America is that Putin's a bad guy, that people are very much thought are against him, and to the extent that people have an opinion, it's against what he's done, what Russia has done in Ukraine. There is a sense of solidarity, again, among those paying attention with Ukraine and with the Ukrainian people. But no one thinks Russia is winning, or that the pendulum is swinging towards Russia. And if we go to this kind of shop-worn language of new Cold War, don't forget that during the Cold War, it wasn't obvious that we were going to win. Anyone in this room who's old enough, who grew up on either side of the Cold War, can remember that. In the United States, whether or not it's true, it's obvious we're going to win against Russia. That is the widespread perception outside of the people who really focus on Russia and have very strong opinions. So I'm a little bit, what do we need to push back? I mean, I just want to say that. Now, with regards to, having said that, a cohesive policy on Russia, a recognition that this is a deeper problem than perhaps we at first thought, that we have a narrow set of options, but perhaps not quite as narrow as we would like. An effort to build support for the project will be important. You are very limited in foreign policy options in kind of post-Iraq America, but you're even more limited if you don't build a consensus for it. And a big issue there, and I think I'm going to say the most controversial thing, and probably the last time I'll speak today, Ukraine has entered into the American dialogue, like Saakashvili's Georgia, as a neocon project. And when that happens, it is not left-wing professors like me who are brainwashing students into thinking, hey, there's a problem. It's ordinary Americans, right, who have a kid who's come back in a body bag, right, or a kid who's suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, who has seen the economy go in the toilet because of neocon projects, right? So this is the wrong way for Ukraine to have come into American politics, and it will be very hard to craft a real policy without building a consensus beyond that. Now, the obvious person to do that in the next few years is Hillary Clinton, who will likely, but not for sure, be the next president. Is probably well positioned to do that. But that's the first challenge before we can come up with a real cohesive policy. One of the things to remember about the United States, as well as all of the countries represented on this panel, as well as the country in which we're sitting now, the leaders of those countries are elected in fair elections. It's not so true in Russia. Now, I think that makes our country stronger, but it also means that they're responsible to the people. And if the people say, hey, jobs and healthcare are more important than fighting in Ukraine, or sending any money over there, you've got to answer that. And answering that doesn't make you weak. It makes you a Democrat, a small d Democrat.
Thank you for that question.
Kamal Kiladi, Center for Studies of Azerbaijan. I have a question for the panel part. For now, what do you think the most important lesson learned in your list of those lessons when it comes to the situation in Ukraine? What's the most important lesson learned for the security of the situation in Europe? Thank you.
That's a good question. Security architecture in Europe? Do we have a security architecture in Europe outside of NATO on one side, and I will argue again a very weak CSA? Yes.
If I may, thank you very much. There are several lessons. I don't know if they are learned, but there are several lessons. At the very technical, military technical expert level, there is a lesson that Russia is able and willing to deploy on relatively short notice one significant level of troops. It's a very important lesson. Second lesson, that Russia is able and willing to rewrite rules which were defining or which were determining European security architecture, transatlantic security architecture for several decades. The next lesson is that even if slower as we wish, but NATO is able to adapt somehow itself to the new situation. NATO made a huge change in itself during the last 2 years. It's not so visible because usually people are reading contingency plans, strategic documents, and those things, but a lot of job has been done. What else?
I could come in here with just a comment. I've covered NATO for 25 years in Brussels. Yes, there's a lot of hoo-ha about the spearhead and about the 5,000 brigade that you mentioned that will be able to deploy. But let's not forget, it took NATO 17 years to reform its headquarters structure. And I'm very skeptical when I think about this giant new NRF, NATO Response Force, 40,000, 30,000, whatever it will be, that is going to be able to deploy very quickly, or that it will even reach its full operating capacity on time. A healthy dose of skepticism is there, which brings in the question of defense spending, or spending defense quickly enough in order to answer our general question here about do we have the other stones to meet any sort of domino effect if there is a domino effect. So I'm a little bit skeptical about all of these wonderful changes that took place in NATO. It's an institution that moves very slowly.
Just one remark. I'm not saying that NATO is perfect. I'm just saying that it's still the best we have.
Of course, but it moves very slowly, and you just highlighted how quickly Russia can move. Yes. There's no need for stones. Yes, please, Ambassador.
Well, I think, maybe there are some lessons which analysis will find. I think there's at least one lesson. Maybe it's not a new lesson, but there is a lesson out of all of this. I think I would call the lesson the necessity to stand united. Putin has been very good over all this time to surprise us. With his next move and next and so on and so forth. I think there was one point at which he himself was surprised. That was when the European Union, together with the United States and others, took a common set of sanctions. I think he didn't count for that. I think he didn't expect us to be able to come up in transatlantic unity with a common set of sanctions against Russia. So I think that was a very significant step, and these sanctions are effective. They are biting. I think Russia wants these sanctions away. It's partly motivating their tendency to be ready to de-escalate in Ukraine. And I think this unity has shown some effectiveness, and I think we should do everything we can to keep it.
They did go fast, the sanctions. That's very true. Yes.
I just want to respond briefly to the questions about lessons learned by the part of the West. And I would boil it down to one thing, which is don't start what you can't finish. And just to make that clear, the roots of the Russian invasion of Ukraine is not Abkhazia and South Ossetia in 2008. It goes back to signals that Russia had been sending long before that about hostility. And I'm not saying we should have backed down. I don't believe that. But this was to some extent coming down the pike for a long time. And if you are going to talk to a country about becoming a Western-oriented democracy, coming into NATO, you can't get them halfway down that road and say, oh, well, things are going rough. So if you, and this is great bearing on Georgia, because right now Georgia is halfway down that road. So to the west, don't start what you can't finish. To some extent, coming down the pike for a long time. Any more questions from the floor? If you are going to talk to a country about becoming a Western-oriented democracy, coming into NATO.
Well, as Alexander has left, I think. No, but actually, I have two parts in your question. I think first of all, I would like to say democracy and security go hand in hand. I think they actually reinforce each other very much. So I think we should work for both simultaneously. And the second about Minsk. Well, I would not say that Minsk is perfect, but Minsk is at the moment the only mechanism we have. And that is why we need to put our efforts into this mechanism to succeed.
Okay, we can continue this, or we're 10 minutes over. My instincts tell me to stop. I'm not sure we have some final speakers who are due here. Are they coming? Minister of Defense, Georgian Minister of Defense, is she here? Can someone from the organization tell me? Or can we continue this debate until she arrives?
I have information that Deputy Minister of Defense.
Okay, very good. Well, I think we should bring this to a close. First of all, I want to thank all of our panelists and thank the audience for excellent questions. Really an interesting collection of issues here, and let's bring this to an end. Thank you very much. See the podium of the next speaker. I think we should bring this to a close. First of all, I want to thank all of our panelists and thank the audience for excellent questions. Really an interesting collection of issues here, and let's bring this to an end. Thank you very much.
I'm mindful of the fact that I'm the person standing between you and a great reception that will follow, so please bear in mind, so I'll be quite brief. My name is Dr. Anna Dolice. I'm the Deputy Minister of Defense. I have recently come back to Georgia after having lived for about 9 years abroad in North America, and I'm very pleased to be present at this forum. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for your active contribution. Especially thank you to those of you that have made a very long trip from across the ocean or from Western Europe. Also, I would like to thank our great partners who have been standing shoulder to shoulder with Georgia's Ministry of Defense. I believe the conference was a success, and it's due to our mutual efforts. I appreciate your efforts as well. Certainly, I would also like to thank those from our staff who have worked really hard from all three entities, Ministry of Defense, GFSIS, and SINA, who have worked really hard to put this forum together. It was really due to their effort that we are all here today. Certainly, many of you will be aware that the conference is now a tradition. It's been organized for a number of times already, and we're really happy to carry this tradition forward. We believe that it does meet the expectations. It does create and foster very interesting dialogue and definitely new ideas about the region. But what is important for us is that the tradition does not turn into a ritual. And therefore, this reason, we need to innovate. Let me assure you that we are aware of the feedback. We have been doing notes about the conference. We're writing down the ideas that were mentioned here, and we will guarantee you that we will innovate with the conference. And every year you'll come here, you'll hear new things, you'll add new things to the format. At the same time, I've noticed, and I'm sure you would agree with me, that if you look at the names of the panels and the excellent speakers that we've had at the panel, this conference is more than just
Georgia Security Conference. This conference encompasses topics that are much beyond just Georgia or Georgia's interests. We have witnessed and heard panels such as hybrid warfare, transatlantic relations, Black Sea security, security in the Middle East. So I would hope that this conference is turning into a regional focal point for discussion and debate about security issues in the region. I'm also very grateful about the debate that has taken place here. The panels were very interesting, the questions were fascinating, and we're definitely very happy to have witnessed some critical discussion, disagreements, conversations, both at panels and outside. As democracy and the value of democracy from the pragmatic side has been mentioned in some of the panels, let me join some of the panelists in reiterating from the pragmatic perspective that democracies are not just better because they're peaceful. We know that it's been proven empirically. Democracies are also smarter. And they're smarter because democracies, the only place where you have an actual and active debate is a liberal democracy where freedom of expression is guaranteed. It's through debate, discussion, conversation that we have knowledge, and knowledge is what makes our country smarter. You are very well aware, and I have been witness to this process, that this country has fought very hard to obtain freedom of expression. And let me assure you that freedom of expression will be one of the values that will carry Georgia forward. One of the issues, of course, one of the themes that has been present here, what has been Russia's interest in its near abroad, and many themes that have been mentioned here remind me of a great American poet, Wallace Stevenson's line. I don't know if any of you are into poetry or remember the line, but he did say, "All order is disorder, all disorder is order. These two are one." One of the issues, of course, maintaining disorder through various means, propaganda, warfare, presence of soft power, is one of the exercises, one of the instruments with which Russia is active in the region, and it's actually through knowledge to fostering debate, critical discussion that we can actively counter this disorder that Russia fosters in the region. And last but not least, let me thank everybody who has expressed signs of solidarity with Georgia, both at the panels and at the various bilateral meetings that have taken place. Let me remind ourselves of one of my favorite philosophers, who I think is a great figure for transatlantic cooperation. She would definitely be surprised for being characterized so, Hannah Arendt. She mentioned that, and because of her origins, because of her writings about totalitarianism and her origins from Germany as well as the United States. She has written a lot about solidarity, and as she has written, solidarity is a web of mutual obligations created through expressions of support. It's through solidarity that any community is created, and it's through solidarity that the experience of civic togetherness is created. Therefore, any expressions by you of support to Georgia's belongingness to this community that is present here is very important to us, and for this we are definitely grateful. With these words, I would again emphasize our gratefulness for your participation, for the efforts, for your presence, for the efforts the speakers made to present us with new information and new ideas. And please enjoy first of all, enjoy the two following speakers, and definitely enjoy the reception, and see you next year.
I will be very short and very personal. I have a dream to deliver closing remarks to this conference once. So I'm really pleased with the technical I would like to thank you for coming to this conference. I'm very grateful for your questions, for your participation, and for your ideas. First of all, I would like to thank you to your partners, to GFSIS, especially to Katie Musbari, Nodar Kashiradze, and other friends who really made a lot for this conference, not only from the beginning, but also, I hope, for the future of this conference. Second, to Ministry of Defense of Georgia, I really believe that establishing a partnership with the ministry was a real asset for the prestige and for the outcomes of this conference. I would like to thank to my team, Senapi, Katarina, Matuš, Tomáš. I'm really proud of you. I know that you did that conference first time, and I think it's a good outcome. So thanks a lot. I would like to thank you also to our families, partners, for the patience and support. Without their support and patience, this conference would not be a reality. I would like to thank you also to your sponsors. It's very important. The International Visegrad Fund, NATO Science for Peace, the Canadian government. That's all. Thank you very much. And I hope we will meet in the South Caucasus Forum in 2016 here in Tbilisi.
Let me also to congratulate everybody with this excellent conference. I think that the conference is not designed in order to find consensus or find compromises on issues. I see that the climate is still very controversial. The views are very controversial. They remain controversial after the debates and conferences. But it's, I think, normal and very good. Conferences is especially invented to debate and to check your own ideas and your beliefs and to learn something from each other. I think in this sense, this conference was very good and very fruitful. We learned a lot of things, but still we haven't got compromised ideas about certain things. For example, should Georgia be accepted in the NATO as a member of the NATO in the near future or not? There are divergent views about this. Should Georgia still go a long way or not? And would it be beneficial for security, or it will be rising more risks around Georgia itself, toward Georgia itself and in the region? Or another question, how we should treat increasing Russian propaganda? Should we stand with the same methods, or trying to invent something to defend against this propaganda? Or we should go with another way, just calmly continue covering objective news, objective information, providing, if nothing happens, our views to the population. Or the Black Sea is an important topic also. We could not all agree on the one thing, whether, for example, whether NATO should increase its presence in the Black Sea, should change the regime of access of vessels and big vessels to military vessels to the Black Sea. Should this be changed, or it should remain like it is? So there is no compromise on these issues, but there were lots of arguments, pro and contra. And this is very important that we know these arguments now, and we can elaborate more, and we can work on this more in the future. So I would not take much of your attention. I'll just say that I'm very happy to see all of you here. I'm very happy to cooperate with SENA and the Ministry of Defense, with our organization where I work. That was honored to be partner in this very important conference and to serve you. Thank you very much, and always welcome in Georgia, and we will be always happy to help, to serve, to make whatever is possible for such an important aim. And thank you very much again, and thanks very much to all who contributed to the debates and to the conference success.